There is an object in a museum in Athens that, by the rules of history, should not exist. It's a 2,000-year-old machine, full of precisely cut gears. Technology so advanced that nothing like it would appear again anywhere on Earth. For more than 1,000 years, we've built working copies of it. They function, and we still argue about how ancient people managed to make it at all. It's called the Antikythera mechanism, and it is, as far as we can tell, the world's first computer. Built 15 centuries before the world was supposed to be ready for it. Now, computer might sound like a stretch. So let's be clear about what this thing actually did, because it's the part that breaks people's brains. This was a hand-powered device that could predict the future. You turned a crank on the side, and it told you when the next eclipse would happen. It showed you the phase of the moon. It tracked the sun, the movements of the planets, and even told you which year the next Olympic Games would fall on. It took the messy, complicated motion of the entire night sky, and it calculated it with bronze. So how did a civilization without electricity, without machine tools, without any of the things we think you need for precision engineering, build a working computer? To understand that, we have to start where it was found, at the bottom of the sea. The year is 1900. A crew of Greek sponge divers, sailing home, get caught in a storm and take shelter near a tiny island called Antikythera. When the weather clears, they dive and stumble onto a Roman-era shipwreck, scattered across the seabed, about 2,000 years old. It's a jackpot. The wreck is full of treasure, bronze and marble statues, jewelry, coins, pottery. The divers haul up everything they can. And tangled in with the beautiful, valuable statues is a lump, a corroded, shapeless chunk of bronze about the size of a large book. Next to the gleaming artwork, it looks like garbage. Honestly, it nearly got ignored completely. It sat in a museum crate while everyone fussed over the statues. Then, months later, the lump cracked open as it dried out. And inside the corrosion, someone saw something impossible. Gear teeth, precisely cut, interlocking gear wheels, inside an object made 2,000 years ago. That should not be there. Gears like that belong to clocks, and clocks were more than 1,000 years in the future. This is where the mystery begins. And it took almost a century to crack it, because for decades, nobody could agree on what this thing was, or how to see inside it without destroying it. The mechanism was fragile, fused into lumps, and most of it was missing. Then in the 2000s, researchers hit it with the modern equivalent of a superpower, high-resolution X-ray imaging that could peer straight through the corrosion and read the machine layer by layer. What they found was staggering. The device wasn't just a few gears. It was a system of at least 30 interlocking bronze gears working together, and on the surfaces, thousands of tiny letters, inscriptions, a user's manual, engraved right into the metal. This wasn't a toy or a decoration. It was an instrument, designed to be read and used. So let's actually walk through how it worked, because the cleverness is the whole point. Picture a wooden box, about the size of a shoebox. On the front, a big circular dial with pointers, like a clock face, except instead of hours, it shows the zodiac and the calendar. On the back, 2 spiral dials that track long cycles of time. And on the side, 1 single crank. You turn that crank. Inside, the whole gear train comes to life. One gear drives the next, which drives the next, each one spinning at a carefully chosen speed. The pointers on the dials move. And because the gears are cut with specific numbers of teeth, those pointers don't just spin randomly. They move exactly the way the sun and moon and stars move across the real sky. Turn the crank forward, and you're fast-forwarding through time. The machine shows you where everything in the heavens will be, on any date you choose. The heart of it is eclipse prediction. Ancient astronomers had noticed something over centuries of watching. Eclipses repeat in a rhythm, a cycle of about 18 years, known as the Saros cycle. So the builders of the mechanism encoded that rhythm directly into metal. One of the gears has exactly 223 teeth, because 223 months is the length of that eclipse cycle. They took a pattern they'd found in the sky, and they turned it into a number of teeth on a wheel. That is, when you think about it, exactly what a computer does. It's math made physical. But here's the detail that genuinely stuns engineers even today. The moon, as it orbits the Earth, doesn't move at a constant speed. It speeds up and slows down because its orbit is an ellipse, not a perfect circle. A simple gear can't reproduce that. A plane gear turns at a steady rate, and yet the Antikythera mechanism does reproduce it. Its makers built in a clever trick: 2 gears mounted slightly off-center, connected by a little pin sliding in a slot. As they turn, that off-center pin makes the motion speed up and slow down, mimicking the real, uneven motion of the moon almost perfectly. Sit with that. 2,000 years ago, someone understood the moon's motion well enough and engineered precisely enough to reproduce a subtle astronomical irregularity using a pin sliding in a slot. This isn't luck. This isn't a simple machine. This is the work of a tradition of skilled people who really knew what they were doing, which raises the question that makes this object almost painful to think about. If humans could do this 2,000 years ago, where is everything else? Because that's the truly haunting part of the Antikythera mechanism. It's not just advanced, it's alone. There is no chain of similar devices leading up to it, and no chain leading down from it. Nothing else this complex survives from the ancient world at all, and nothing this mechanically sophisticated shows up again in the historical record for well over 1,000 years, until the geared clocks of medieval Europe. It's a spike of impossible genius sitting by itself in the timeline, with darkness on both sides. So what happened? How do you invent the computer and then lose it for a millennium and a half? The uncomfortable answer is that this is what usually happens to knowledge. We tend to imagine technology as a staircase that only ever climbs. But that's a comforting illusion. In reality, advanced knowledge is fragile. A device like this was probably the product of a small number of extraordinary craftsmen working in one tradition, writing little of it down. If the workshops close, if the masters die without training successors, if war and disruption break the chain, the knowledge doesn't get passed on. It just stops. The books rot, the skills vanish, and the objects themselves get melted down for their metal or lost in shipwrecks at the bottom of the sea. We very nearly never knew any of this. If that one ship hadn't sunk and been preserved underwater and been stumbled on by sponge divers 2,000 years later, we would have no idea the ancient Greeks could build such a thing. We'd have confidently told you it was impossible. Which forces a genuinely unsettling thought. How many other inventions were lost so completely that we don't even know they existed? The Antikythera mechanism survived by pure luck. It's a single surviving page from a book we can otherwise never read. And that's really what this strange bronze box is trying to tell us. Not just that ancient humans were smarter than we give them credit for, though they clearly were. It's something bigger. Genius isn't a modern invention. The capacity to observe the universe, find its patterns, and build a machine to capture them, that has been sitting inside human beings for a very, very long time. The people who built this didn't have our tools, or our science, or our words for what they were making, but they looked up at a sky full of moving lights, saw hidden order in the chaos, and decided to carve that order into bronze, so they could hold the heavens in a box and turn them with a crank. We call it the first computer, but maybe the real lesson is simpler and stranger. The ancient world was capable of things we've barely begun to imagine, and most of what they achieved we will never get to see, because it's still down there, in the dark, at the bottom of the sea.